You, sir, win the prize of the internet for the day. What a great question this is. So you got a PowerStroke 6.0, you live in a cold climate, you're trying to decide between the 240 and the 320. Let's just spin it up for everybody. So recognize the glow plugs are the issue, right? So that's the number one issue with any 6-liter. The glow plugs stay on for a period of time after ignition that can be up to 2 minutes. Now, when you start your truck and the oil temperature is 90 degrees, say, it's like half a second. Who even cares? But at 50, it's 45 seconds. At 30, it's 1:15. And 0 degrees and colder, it's 2 minutes. And while that is going on, you've got a 230 amp pulsating drawdown against your charging system, and your stock alternator only does 75 amps at cold idle. That's not awesome. In addition, you may have seen that the VT365 International's version of this motor comes with a way bigger alternator, and yet about 1 in 250-ish FICMs that come into us for repair come to us from Internationals, and the only difference is the alternator. These are things that make you go, right? And so now it's a conversation of, okay, I know I need a bigger alternator, which one? So if you live in a southern climate, like a Houston, a Miami, a Corpus Christi, someplace that you don't even know what cold weather is because you're smarter than I am, very frankly. And so if that's the case, like our 185 amp makes a whole lot of sense. Not because it's 185. That's a marketing number. Pay attention. That alternator does 135 amps at cold idle. That's the number you care about. Instead of 75, 135, yeah, it's better. And what's slick about that is that you don't necessitate any cabling. Take the win. Okay. But now say you live in a colder place, like this fella here in our comment. Not only does he live in a cold place, but he uses his truck as a truck. So he's like, hey, I plow. Okay, so here's the conversation. So if you don't do that, say you just live in a tundra type climate and you want something better, probably the 240 amp that does 190 amps at cold idle would be what you want. It's pretty not bad. It's pretty awesome. Now, and that's good enough for like 95% of our customers. But then here are some things that, that kind of change things up a little bit. Say, for example, that you only use this truck for short trips. Well, you want to prevent the drawdown of the batteries even more if you could. So now you start talking about a bigger alternator. Like, for example, instead of the currently priced as of November 2024, our 240 amp alternator that does 190 is $525. The next step up is a 320. Well, the 320, it does 250 amps at cold idle. You say, well, hold on a second, Ed. What about in the middle? Don't you carry a 270 from a different provider? Totally do. We carry 270 from DC Power. And so it's like, okay, fine. So DC Power, what's interesting about that one is that's got a billet aluminum case, which, by the way, our other ones are available with billet aluminum cases as well. But that one has, because it's billets, a billet case does a better job of dissipating heat. And so you're like, maybe you want to do that. So that one's $729. But for $799, instead of doing an alternator that does 180 at cold idle, which is what the 270 from DC does, the $800 alternator does 250 at cold idle. Okay, now we're cooking with gas. Now, in this case, we got a customer using a plow. And we're like, okay, I'm using a plow. What does that mean? Well, take a look at your owner's manual on your plow. You'll find out that even your poly plows, they burn some serious amps when you lift up that plow blade. Now, if you've got a steel blade, oh, sweet Jesus and Lord help us. It's stupid amperage. Or similar with a winch. I'm going to use a 12,000-pound winch more than recreationally. You're going to find out that the amp draw on those is obscene. Like, we're talking north of 400 amps. Holy buckets, man, that's a lot. Now, in the case of a winch, it's a little bit different because that's more of a continuous draw for the minute and a half, 2 minutes that you're winching for, and you don't want to, go ahead and burn your batteries down in that time. And of course, you have a high idle mod on. If you don't know about the high idle mod, Google that. You can flip with a switcher at 1100 RPM and life is better. And now, like our 240 at 1100 RPM, instead of doing 190, it does something closer to like 220. All right, fine. But the 320 does closer to like 280. And you're like, oh, wow, okay, now we're cooking with gas. That's pretty not bad, sure enough. And of course, you got the 370, which does even more. So now the conversation becomes, and by the way, also even a 400, but the conversation now becomes, hey, I got a plow. I pick up the plow blade, and yes, it pulls all these amps, but it only pulls all these amps for just less than a second before the draw is down. Recognize internal to these alternators is a voltage regulator. What does it do? It regulates voltage. It's not dynamically covering the load of a plow lifting up or a winch engaging. What it's doing is it's watching the voltage available on the batteries, and if the voltage on the batteries isn't what it needs to be, if it's below its voltage regulator set point, which on this line of alternators is set up at 14.8, if it's like, hey, look, if it's not at 14.8, I'm going to push it a little harder. And so it goes ahead and it spins up and it pushes out a little more. So you could never have too large of an alternator. Please remember, you absolutely can have too small of one. But by the time that your voltage drops and stays dropped, recognize that your 300, 400, 500 amp draw from picking up your plow, it's already gone. So now the only question becomes, okay, fine. So say you're plowing commercially and say you're plowing parking lots. So you're not just plowing a city street where you drop the plow blade and it stays down for miles and miles. You're constantly picking it up, dropping it, picking it up, dropping it, picking it up, dropping it over and over and over again. Well, one thing, you probably want to be looking at AGM batteries. We really like the Odysseys, which are for sale on our website, just saying. And by the way, I got a pair of Odysseys in my Excursion, which I totally love. Those batteries are 12 years old. They still test out the equivalence in new. Oh, take my money. They're awesome. But regardless of any of that, if you pick up your plow blade over and over and over again, you're going to start having a problem where the batteries are just saying, help me, mother, right? And so the alternator's going to be like, I got you, man. It's going to be pushing. But recognize that AGM batteries very specifically can take more juice as they approach a full state of charge than lead acids can, which is kind of nice for your plow application. But regardless, once the alternator says, oh, yep, we got a problem, Houston, we have a problem here, and the voltage numbers aren't where they want to be, that alternator will spin up and spin up and spin up and spin up to go ahead and push out as many electrons as the batteries can possibly take to get to back to that voltage regulator set point. So I would say if you live in New York and you plow just residentially, I would say the 240 is probably fine for you. But if you plow commercially and you don't want to do this again, yeah, I'm sorry. You probably want the 320. So I hope this helps. And by the way, if you're in a similar situation but you winch professionally, not even the 320, you probably want our 400 or at least the 370. So I hope this helps. Feel free to put the comments as you see them in the video. We'll respond to them as we're able. Obviously, we've got more than a follower or two, so keeping up with the comments is getting to be a little bit of a trick. But we're in this together. So if you're not getting a comment, a response back timely enough, and you want to drop a PM or whatever, feel free to do that, and we'll take care of you that way too. All right. So for now, onward and upward. Recognize with all these cablings, with all these alternators, you do need auxiliary cabling. Beginning with the 240, you need auxiliary cabling. And just when you're looking at alternator competitors, recognize that A, we rep for everybody, but B, it's all about idle amperage. Like for example, there's a company out there that makes a 220 amp alternator that does 110 at cold idle. Well, my 240, which sounds a lot like 220, my 240 does 190 at cold idle, as we were talking about. And so it's like, so 220 does 110, 240 does 190. Yeah, I'll take the 240 every day of the week. So at any rate, I hope this answers your question. Kind of a long-winded, I apologize. If you hung out with me this long, I super appreciate you. And if you have hung out with me this long, why in the world haven't you liked my video? Why haven't you subscribed? Why haven't you reposted? Come on, man. We're all in this together. You know we are. It's not just a one-way thing here. Hook a fella up. I appreciate you all. Thanks very much. FICMRepair.com. We really are all in this together. Thank you.